One secret wedding present was revealed by your lover. Everything was altered by the secret within. Now open this. Your partner stopped before their fingers even touched the ribbon because of something about the present. It had spent the entire evening sitting behind the others, barely noticeable beneath a table laden with elegantly wrapped parcels, flowers, and cards. It was finally silent in the room. The earlier laughter has vanished. Only a few warm lights were still shining throughout the room, and chairs were positioned slightly off. Numerous wedding presents had already been unwrapped by your lover. This one, though, felt different. There was only a tiny ivory box wrapped with a thin silver ribbon, their name written across the top in handwriting they instantly recognized, and no eye-catching packaging or printed card. They gazed at it, then turned to face the doorway as though they were waiting for someone to show up. Nobody did. Instead of putting a wedding gift with everything else, why would someone conceal it? And why had no one brought it up? The ribbon was gradually ripped loose by your sweetheart. There was another sealed envelope under the lid, but the letter wasn't the first item they saw. It was a small item carefully placed next to it. In an instant, their expression altered. Hold on to this moment because the reason this present was concealed in the first place was about to be revealed by what appeared to be an ordinary memento. It was a tiny antique key that wasn't ornamental or costly. A thin paper tag had been threaded around the worn metal. That tag had 3 handwritten words on it. When you're positive. Confused, your partner muttered the words to themselves before grabbing the packet. One folded paper and an upside-down photo were found inside. They haven't yet touched the picture. Rather, they opened the letter and started reading. They sat down after hearing the first few sentences. Long before the wedding, someone close to them had made this gift, but they had one strange request. Only when your soulmate had finally realized the difference between selecting someone because life felt comfortable and choosing someone because it felt incomplete to imagine the future without them could it be opened. Their gaze scanned the paper more quickly at first, then more slowly. Months of discussions were detailed in the letter. No one had informed you about times when your soulmate had discreetly stood up for you, talked about your tiniest acts of kindness, recalled information you probably thought they had forgotten, and acknowledged something they had never had the courage to voice out loud. What, though, might need an old key? And behind that face-owned shot, what lay ahead? The significance of the wedding gift completely changed after your partner saw the letter's additional detail. One sentence had been underlined twice near the bottom. A door cannot be opened with a key. It allows me to reveal the truth you were reluctant to acknowledge. Your soulmate froze. The ancient wooden cabinet across the room caught their attention right away. All of a sudden, they realized who owned the key. After moving across the room and opening the cabinet, they found a little wooden case concealed beneath a pile of records. The old key turned flawlessly. Click. There were other sealed messages inside, all dated months apart. All of them had your name on them, but these weren't other people's letters. Your lover was able to identify their own handwriting. These letters appear to have been written during times when they were unable to express their emotions verbally. They were then given to someone who pledged to keep them secret until the appropriate time. Why would they keep their own words to themselves? After reading just 2 lines of the first note, your soulmate's eyes began to well up with emotion. At last, they recalled the picture that was still inside the original present. They rushed back, flipped it over, and everything came together. A moment between you that your sweetheart had never even seen photographed was caught in the picture. There was a date and a single statement on the back. "That's when it started," your partner muttered after reading it twice and covering their mouth. However, what precisely had begun that day? The following sealed note held the solution. Before they cracked the seal, the second envelope was shaking between your soulmate's fingers because the date on it precisely matched the picture. They just stood in the warm light for a few seconds, listening to the quiet that had descended upon the empty room. The page was then unfolded. Their eyes widened at the first sentence. "Today, I came to the realization that, without trying, I could recall every detail about them." Your sweetheart kept reading the lines they had written months before, but for some reason they were shoved to the back of their mind. They had talked about the way you listened when everyone else appeared impatient, the slight shift in your expression while you were trying not to laugh, and the peculiar serenity they had each time you walked into a crowded room. The detail that caused them to stop, however, came next. They had evidently promised themselves on that same day. Months later, if those emotions didn't change, they would finally quit acting like their relationship was normal. Why hadn't they told you, then? 3 lines below was the response. They hadn't been unsure about you. They had questioned whether they were prepared to develop into the kind of person needed for this kind of love. Before you let that thought go, take note of what transpired next. Because a date from just 2 weeks later was on another envelope. The story's course was drastically altered by what was written inside. At first, that following note wasn't romantic. It was practically excruciating. Future-related questions had been jotted down by your partner. Can I be completely honest? Can I give up using timing as a cover? Is it possible for me to construct anything rather than just dream about it? One line had been circled beneath the questions. I already know whose face I will see if I ever make the ultimate decision. Your sweetheart looked back at the picture after lowering the page. All of a sudden, not a single dramatic secret was being revealed by this buried wedding gift. It was revealing to them a path of personal insights they had encountered long before anyone began discussing rituals, pledges, or a common future. And learning about their own emotional past in this manner had an oddly lovely quality. You are allowed to share this tale with someone who can relate if it resonates with you. Your soulmate hasn't yet reached the most peculiar envelope, so leave your opinions in the comments or subscribe and keep tuned for what happens next. It wasn't dated like the others. 5 words, scrawled in darker ink across the front, were only visible after the picture. Why would the picture be so important? What had your lover failed to notice that someone had recorded in that one frozen moment? Instead of staring at you, they picked up the photo once more and examined the background. They noticed it at that point. The individual who had ultimately concealed this wedding present stood behind you both, just out of sight. That individual was not facing the camera. They were seeing how your soulmate gazed at you. The message scribbled on the back appeared out of nowhere. At that point, it began to mean something very different. Before your soulmate was ready to identify the connection, someone else had recognized it. They had witnessed the carefree attention, the unfettered look, and the moment when everything appeared to vanish around your love. The undated envelope was now opened by your lover. There was no more memory inside. It was a message to their future selves. Remember that the most important choice wasn't made today if you're reading this on the day you finally made the decision to pursue love. You continued to pick this person on a daily basis when no one was around. The eyes of your lover softened. However, they weren't prepared for what lay beneath that page. A second, far more recent snapshot. The date from yesterday was written on its back. Just before the wedding preparations started, someone had snatched it. There was a question next to the date. Can you now spot the difference? The two photos were positioned side by your soulmate. As they realized exactly what the secret present was attempting to convey to them, their expression gradually changed. They were unable to view your future together in the same manner after seeing it. The two photos appeared to convey a story without the use of words for a single, breathtaking instant. Your sweetheart was staring at you in the earlier photo with a look they didn't understand at the time. Inquisitive, cautious, and nearly taken aback by their own focus. However, that doubt was eliminated in the picture from yesterday. Their shoulders were at ease. They didn't pose a smile for anyone. And even though everyone else seemed preoccupied with getting ready for the wedding, they were still clearly focused on you. The situation had altered over the course of several months, but their focus had not. The inquiry printed on the picture was gradually grasped by your love. Can you now spot the difference? It wasn't that their emotions had suddenly intensified. It was that they were no longer afraid. They had stopped questioning whether you belonged in their future somewhere between those two pictures, and they had begun subtly constructing that future around you. However, behind the more recent picture, they saw something. Inside the wooden container was a small strip of paper that had been folded so tightly that it had nearly vanished. With caution, they opened it. There was just an address, followed by 4 words. What is the other one? One more letter, one more picture, or one more piece of information they had somehow forgotten. The secret wedding gift has just guided your soulmate past the room where it was unwrapped, so pay close attention. It was not an unknown address. It was peculiar because of that. It belonged to a tiny location your partner had been to years ago, long before there were preparations for a wedding and before anyone knew how significant you may become. The building appeared nearly unaltered when they arrived later that afternoon, with sunlight streaming through the windows. Inside, an elderly family friend was waiting with a sly smile on his face and a small blue box on the table. They said, "I wondered when you'd finally get here." Your lover inquired about the situation right away. The pal pushed the box forward instead of responding. There was a set of little cards inside, each with a question that your soulmate had reportedly responded to during talks over the past year. What gives someone a sense of belonging? What attribute do you hope your future spouse will always possess? In 20 years, what kind of life would truly make you proud? In startled silence, your lover read their own responses. Patience, humor, loyalty, curiosity, generosity even when no one is cheering, and the capacity to add significance to a typical afternoon. The inquiry that altered their countenance then appeared. Who comes to mind when you read this description? It had gone unanswered by your love. Or so they believed. Reaching under the box, the family friend took out one last card. They whispered, "You answered it later. You simply requested that I hold off on showing you until you were ready." The card was turned over by your soulmate. There was your name. It was surrounded by nothing dramatic. Just your name in their own handwriting beneath a question they had previously been too hesitant to respond to, with no lengthy statement or justification. The antique key, the private letters, the pictures, the dates, and even the odd directions all suddenly made sense as part of the disguised wedding gift. Someone who loved your sweetheart had realized that pricey gifts and speeches wouldn't be what they needed most on that big day. They required proof from their own history. Evidence that this decision wasn't made on the spur of the moment. A record of how regularly they had been picking you before they even understood it was the secret contained in the present. However, your soulmate wasn't done yet. There was a small compartment in the bottom of the blue box. When they opened it, they discovered one last envelope with your name on the front, but the handwriting wasn't theirs. Their grin faded into silent surprise. This was written by whom? They inquired. The family friend took a while to respond. Rather, they turned to face the window and said, "This is the only piece you were never supposed to know about until today." After carefully opening the envelope and reading the first sentence, your partner glanced up in shock. The reason this wedding gift had been kept a secret until the last minute was because the person who wrote that last letter knew something about you that had never been mentioned in any of the previous notes. There was something familiar about the handwriting on that last envelope that your lover couldn't instantly identify. And the first sentence was all the more potent because of that uncertainty. If you're reading this, it's finally impossible for you to ignore the person I hoped you would recognize. Your soulmate. Reread it. Across the table, the family friend said nothing, letting the words accomplish what they had been waiting months for. The letter did not use lofty statements to describe you. Ordinary moments were mentioned. Someone needed company that afternoon, so you remained longer than was required. The exchange in which you recalled something that everyone else had forgotten. The time you discreetly altered your own plans to ease your soulmate's situation without anticipating praise. Then they were stopped cold by a question. Have you ever wondered why the individuals who knew you the best began inquiring about this person before you acknowledged your feelings? Your soulmate looked up. They suddenly recalled those seemingly insignificant inquiries. How are things going for them? This weekend, are you going to see them? When their name is spoken, why do you grin differently? Those queries had seemed arbitrary at the time. They now understood that those in their immediate vicinity had been witnessing the unfolding of a story. However, who was the letter's author? In an attempt to find a signature, your lover turned the page. No one was present. Rather, at the bottom was a last command. Find out who saved the first picture. When your partner echoed those comments, the family friend grinned. After that, they went to an old cupboard and came back with a little photo album. The original photograph, which was printed months before the replica concealed in the wedding present, was found inside. Another photo from the same day appeared on the following page, followed by another. A distinct moment between you was captured by each. Nothing dramatic, nothing manufactured. In one, your sweetheart listened intently as you spoke. In another, you two were giggling while everyone else appeared to be preoccupied with something quite different. In the last photo, your partner was still staring at you even though you had already turned away. At last, the acquaintance stated, "Your family saved these because they noticed something you hadn't noticed yet." That was the key. The secret wedding present was never intended to persuade your soulmate to pick you. It was designed to serve as a reminder that their decision had developed organically, subtly, and frequently over hundreds of everyday experiences. Here's the detail that makes staying worthwhile. There was more than one author of the anonymous letter. Recollections from a number of people who had witnessed your relationship develop were combined to create a message that your soulmate could only open when the wedding made it impossible to ignore those recollections. If you've liked following this mystery as it develops, sharing it, commenting on the most surprising moment, or subscribing would be a great way to keep up with such stories. However, the blue package still contained one item. It was hidden beneath the album, a blank card within a clear sleeve, and your partner nearly missed it. There were 2 words on the front. "It's your turn." The family friend clarified that everyone had contributed to the hidden present, with the exception of your partner, whose sentiments were now most important. Since the last secret was not supposed to come from the past, the card was purposefully left empty. It was intended to be written for the future. After a long period of silence, your sweetheart picked up a pen. If you found out that a chronology of your love had been maintained by others before you realized it yourself, what would you write? They started out gently. "I believed that today was the day I would select you." Then they paused, grinned, and went on. "However, I now realize that I have been picking you in subtle ways for a lot longer than I realized." They wrote about the 2 pictures, the notes they had forgotten, and the questions they had answered without realizing that every response was directed at you. They sealed the card, added a last sentence, and requested the original ivory gift box. However, your lover carried the card with them rather than putting it away with everything else. They had determined that you had to read it yourself. Additionally, they didn't start with an explanation when they eventually located you. "Before we proceed, there's something about us I finally understand," they stated, placing that sealed card in your hands. What they had put inside was no longer an old photo, a forgotten recollection, or a remark made by someone else. It was the first truth in the whole secret present made only for you. Your soulmate's voice had changed as they softly stated, "Read the last line twice." Your fingers had just touched the seal. Nor doubt, nor anxiety, but the serenity of someone who has at last made all the necessary connections. The card was opened by you. You were taken through everything they had found in the first few lines. The 2 photos, the forgotten notes, the questions whose answers had unintentionally identified you, and the people who had silently observed the connection before either of you named it. The communication then took on a more intimate tone. I continued to believe that love would reveal itself in a single, memorable moment. The truth had been silently coming to me while I was searching for fireworks. Your soulmate gestured to the card as you looked up. There was more. They described times in the morning when they looked forward to seeing your message. One of your sentences stuck with them, causing them to relive conversations following. Ordinary days that, just by virtue of your involvement, felt somehow different. You then came to the last line. Who I should pick was not revealed by the wedding present. It made clear how long my heart had been making decisions. You've read it once. Then again, just as they had requested. But why was it that before anything else could happen, your sweetheart had to see those words? At last, they sat next to you and described how the secret present had altered everything. Till you open it. They had thought that assurance about the future was the most crucial component of a partnership.